This is Fixing the Funnel, the podcast that calls out the chaos in your marketing and helps you turn it into measurable results. Brought to you by Innovaxis Marketing. Each episode, we dig into what's working, what's wasting your budget, and how to finally align your brand with the buyer you actually want. No buzzwords, no fluff, just straight up insight to help you fix your funnel before it fixes you. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe.
Welcome to Fixing the Funnel. I'm Pat Dunnigan. I'm here with Sean Parnell, the founder and president of Innovaxis, a Chicago marketing agency he started with his wife, Lena, in 2007. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Hey, Pat. Good.
Sean has a background of over 30 years experience in marketing, product management, market research, brand storytelling, content marketing, SEO, and digital marketing. He's also a Blue Ocean strategy practitioner and the author of Historic Bars of Chicago. Today, we'll be talking about brand storytelling and why it's essential for your business. Let's start with the basics, Sean. What exactly is brand storytelling?
Well, brand storytelling is a way to articulate your value to your prospects in a way that really resonates powerfully with them. That centers around looking at your prospect as the hero in their story. So when you think about brand storytelling, like the hero's journey framework developed by Joseph Campbell, any good story, there's a hero that encounters all kinds of problems and obstacles, and how do they overcome those? They meet a guide that helps them overcome those problems and achieve success. So when you think about a movie like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker encounters all these problems and he's not able to deal with those problems effectively or overcome them without Obi-Wan Kenobi, helping him use the Force, to save the galaxy. So in that same manner is how you want to present your brand. And this is really the substance of your brand. What are the problems that you help solve? What are the opportunities created once you solve those problems for your prospects? And do your prospects even have those problems? Those that do are going to be a lot more interested. So it's important to really focus your content and your homepage content, your about page, all throughout your product services pages. Always have the prospect in mind, where starting with what are their problems, what are their challenges, what would cause them to do a Google search or a ChatGPT search, so that when they come to your website and read your materials or talk to your salespeople, that you're focused on finding out what their problems are and explaining to them how you could potentially solve those problems with your products and services and the features and benefits of those. So a lot of companies get it backwards. They really lead with their product, services, features, benefits, but they don't establish what those are for. So prospects already have to know what those are for. And a lot of companies are talking about why they're the best and they've won so many awards. But, Obi-Wan didn't tell Luke Skywalker that he's the best Jedi in the universe and he's the right one to help him. He found out what Luke's problems were and he guided him, to learn the Force and to be successful. So those elements of brand storytelling are really important for any company, organization, even political candidates, to really be focused on what are the problems of the people you serve, and then creating content that really speaks to those problems first. Then the product, services, features, benefits become how you solve those problems along with your people and your process.
So what happens on Earth when you don't have a strategy for brand storytelling?
Well, it's kind of like being on a first date with someone. If the date is just talking about themselves and how great they are, you're probably going to start tuning out pretty quickly. And that's exactly what your prospects do. If we were to say, we're the best website developing company, content marketer, SEO company in the world, and we've won all these awards, you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't speak to my problems. Okay, you sound like you're good, but how do I know that? Who says they're number two, or they're average? Everybody likes to claim they're the best at whatever they work on, and it might be legitimate, but that needs to be self-evident. It's important for your content to really speak to the problems, again, that you solve, and who you solve them for, then how you do it, and that you have credibility in doing it through testimonials, case studies, so that you can establish trust. Then you know the best question you could get is, okay, how do you solve those problems? Now you can really start talking about your product, services, people, process, and what kind of impact that can have for them.
I've heard you also talk about how sometimes without a brand story, prospects get sort of trapped into these random acts of marketing. What does that mean?
Random acts of marketing is simply tactical marketing execution without a plan, without a strategy. So people suffer from random acts of marketing when it seems like they're doing a lot of stuff and it's not generating the leads and sales that they're really looking for because they don't have that comprehensive and holistic strategy. And often they don't know how to pull a strategy together, or they think a series of tactics is a strategy. But really, what it comes down to is very simply, what are your goals? What are your sales and marketing goals? How much revenue increase do you want to see in a given time frame? How many clients or customers would be needed to generate that? How many prospects do you need in your pipeline to generate those sales? And how do you get the prospects in the pipeline to begin with? You know, what's happening now and what do you want to happen? And what's the gap? So then looking at the gap, you can create a marketing strategy to eliminate that gap and to address it. So, and looking at all the things you could possibly do in marketing and prioritizing what's going to move the needle the most and the quickest and with the least amount of effort and cost. And then, and where's the low hanging fruit? So when you don't have a strategic approach like that, then you succumb to just doing a series of things and people wonder why they're not gaining any traction and why their marketing isn't generating results.
So, what are some examples of random marketing acts that you've seen?
Well, one that comes to mind is an IT company that was trying everything and decided to put a billboard up on the side of the Kennedy Expressway. Didn't really work. But really, even effective marketing tactics can be random without a strategy. I mean, for example, we're a HubSpot partner and a ZoomInfo partner, and we've seen a lot of companies invest in those platforms on a whim and spend tens of thousands of dollars and then not use it because it was like the shiny object syndrome. They thought it was really cool. They got a good demo and they decided to go for it, but they didn't have a strategy. And so there was nothing to align the use of ZoomInfo or HubSpot with. So they'd work with it for a while and then it'd be completely underutilized. So that's not good for HubSpot or ZoomInfo, certainly isn't good for the company who uses them and invests in them. So if they saw as part of a strategy that outreach is going to be very important, that ZoomInfo is a great place to acquire contacts and see the intent of people searching and use HubSpot to get those emails out to people on a regular basis and automate follow-up, then they could get much more use out of those investments. So that's something that could be really effective, part of a strategy, but a random act otherwise. And there's many other things like that. Even doing this podcast, it could be a random act of marketing.
Random act of podcasting.
Yeah, random acts of podcasting. So, and we see that because people get excited about things. Ooh, we should have a podcast. And then they put an enormous amount of time and energy into it, but they don't have a plan for keeping up with it. And what are they going to cover? And then how is that going to help? And how are they going to promote it to build up an audience? And what does that do for them? Does that achieve their aims to build an audience, or are they trying to generate leads from podcasting? So what's the strategy? If there isn't a strategy, you can spend all this time on creating podcasts and it really have very little benefit for you. So there are many things like that in marketing, even AI. So there's, that's a huge buzzword right now. And people want to come up in more AI related searches, ChatGPT and otherwise, but they don't really know how to get there. It is a rapidly evolving thing. But if you're just subscribing to software because it looks like it can track interesting things, but then like with HubSpot and ZoomInfo, if you don't keep using it, if you don't build it in your process and there's no strategy to where that fits in, then you're unlikely to get strong value out of it.
So what's your process for helping clients implement their brand story? How does it begin?
Well, we've developed a brand storytelling workshop, which is where we start, which is the better part of a day or perhaps a couple of days for a larger client or a company that has a multitude of products and services. But it really looks at, what's your true mission? We start there. What do you really do for people? Not what you manufacture or what service you provide, but rather what's the value you provide and why do you provide it? We always like to start there. Why was the company founded? Why do you have the name that you have? Those tend to go central to your real value. And I'm not talking about mission statements. I think created by a committee that's probably outdated, not really the place to start, though, we'd like to take a look at it. But it's really, what are you really doing? Because we want to get to who's your target market. A lot of people talk about ICPs, which is your ideal client or customer profile. We think of it as target markets, and there's usually multiple target markets. So those are the people you serve. And who are the people you serve more? Who would you like to serve, but maybe you're not serving today? That could be part of a growth strategy. And then for those people, what are the problems you solve? There's usually some problems you solve that a multitude of people have, that are common problems. So we start there. What are the most common problems you solve? And then for each target market or ICP, there's usually something a little different. They usually have some different types of problems that are unique. So then in the brand storytelling process, we look at the overarching problems, the golden thread that runs through everything, and then what are the sub-brand stories that address these specific problems that specific target markets have that others don't. And there can also be sub-brand stories developed around different geographic markets, especially if you sell outside the country or even within the country. There could be, even within, say, the automotive industry, it's going to be very different in the US versus Europe versus Japan. So because those markets will have unique requirements from one another. So that's what you want to capture, those overarching problems that you solve. Then for your most important markets, what are specific problems that they have, and how do you help them overcome them? Because it's not just with products and services, it's also with your people and your process. So then we get into, what is your process before a sale, after a sale? How do you express empathy so that prospects know that you understand them and their problems? And then how do we overcome resistance in the sales process? How do we address the things that they fear? Because if they're going to invest, especially if it's a significant amount of money, sometimes not even that, it's about trust. How can you get them to trust you? And one of those ways is to really address head on what resistance they have in the sales process and what can they count on you for that might not actually be written into an agreement or a contract, that helps that build trust in that once they invest in what you're selling, you're going to be there for them. You're going to help ensure success well after the sale in some cases. So that whole process, the workshop is a series of questions that helps our clients articulate all those things to us. And then we analyze and synthesize it. And then we create updated foundational messaging from what we learn in those sessions and really evolve what's on their homepage, the about page, their main solutions pages, their market serve pages, et cetera, throughout the site and throughout their marketing collateral, advertising, and outbound campaigns.
What kind of results can a business expect when they get their brand storytelling right? How do you know it's working?
Our clients typically want double-digit growth at least. For some of the younger businesses or startups we work with, they might want triple-digit growth or more. But often we're working with established businesses that are not achieving the growth that they want. They might be on that dreaded plateau where growth is flat or worse, declining, or they're growing at 5%, but they want to grow at 10 or 20%. So that's their gap, where they are and where they want to be. So once you create a holistic and comprehensive marketing strategy, then go through the brand storytelling process and start to execute on what else is in the plan, which is some combination of other inbound and outbound marketing efforts, from content marketing to SEO to outbound campaigns. Then once those are executed with a firm understanding of the problems that our prospects are having and messaging that resonates with them, we start to see the leading indicators really improve. So the lagging indicators are leads and sales. The leading indicators of marketing are, how are you ranking? And not just on search engines anymore like Google, but how are you coming up in ChatGPT and other LLM type of searches? So we start to see increases in rankings and visibility in the AI LLMs like ChatGPT. Then we start to see, with increased activity and visibility there, we start to see increased organic and overall traffic to the site. We start to see interaction on the site with what pages are they looking at? How long are they on those pages? Are they looking at, what's their path of what pages they look at? And then do they contact, or if it's an e-commerce site, do they make a sale or do they download something? And then what happens from there? So we start to see increases in all that activity, and then the leads start to increase and the e-commerce sales start to increase directly following that.
Are there other ways in which brand story marketing differs from traditional marketing techniques?
Well, traditional branding is more creative led. So we see a lot of marketing agencies out there approaching prospects and saying, you need a new website. And sometimes the prospect thinks they need a new website. The vast majority of people don't need a new website, but they might need a refresh, and they typically will need a content overhaul. But if a lot of marketing agencies were started by more creative types, designers, graphic designers, web designers. So they approach it from a more creative angle versus a strategic angle. Well, why do you want a new website? What do you want to achieve with it? Well, we want to grow. Well, how much do you want to grow? Is it that double-digit growth or is it something else? And then what's happening now? Why aren't you growing with your current website? And is it because it's got a bad design? Some websites are outdated and do need more than a design refresh. But if the design is professional and the website isn't generating leads, which is what they really want, then they probably need much stronger messaging, content marketing, SEO. That's why we conduct a marketing audit and plan to really understand what's holding them back and what is the plan that they need to go forward. But the traditional approach is you need a new website and maybe a branding overhaul, but it's more of a creative exercise. It's not really a strategic one. There is strategy to creative exercises, but not holistic strategy. So then 6, 9 months, a year later, you get your amazingly designed new website, and it still doesn't generate leads because it wasn't really the design that was holding back lead generation. It was lack of strategy and brand storytelling content, as well as thought leadership content, that holds them back. So we think of brand storytelling as really the substance of your branding, and more traditional branding is the style. So of course, style without substance isn't going to get you very far, but substance that doesn't look good and has no style also can hold you back for sure. So that's why whenever we work on a homepage and foundational messaging overhaul, we always start with the content. What do we need to communicate in terms of problem solved, opportunities that can be seized, for who, how that's done with product, services, features, benefits, credibility, testimonials, case studies, news and events, things like that. That's a good brand story flow. And then that's better than taking a look at your existing content, or worse, requiring the client to provide new content, which is a heavy lift for most clients, and then applying a creative treatment to it and focusing more on different creative options versus focusing on the substance of the brand and how to really improve that. So it really comes down to style versus substance.
So if a company has a busy marketing department and they're already doing a lot of blogs and social media and email campaigns, how can they tell if they're missing a strong brand story?
Well, a good way to find out is to have your clients or customers, or perhaps if you sell through channel partners, to critique your website and ask them, is our website clear to you what problems we solve, who we solve them for, how we do it, and that you can trust us to do it? And see what they say. Now, of course, you can ask yourself that, by looking at your own website and trying to be as objective as you can. And that's also, a good first step. And then if you're not sure or you think you're in good shape, then ask your customers and partners and other trusted advisors. And of course, you could ask us. We conduct many a marketing audit and plan that's really designed to identify what are things that could be improved and new things that could be done that maybe you haven't even thought of. That can identify those gaps and create and lead to a plan for how to address those gaps in a way that's cost effective, expedient, and really generates the results that you want to see.
What's the best way for a business to get started building a great brand story?
Well, first, it's to take a look at what you have and see, all the things you could do in marketing, how important might that be? But, take a look at it in a fresh light and see, like I said, talk to people you trust. What does it say to them? If you find that, there could be some real issues, then talk to us and we can explain how, if you want to take it on yourself, we could serve as an advisor. Or if you want to really, dig in, we could talk about conducting a brand story workshop and how to implement what's found and discovered in that process.
So what's the best way for a business to get started building a great brand story?
Well, to have some self-reflection, take a look at your site and can you answer those questions? Get input from trusted advisors. And if it is something that looks like it's high priority, then you can talk to us and we're happy to have a brand story consultation. You could just go to www.innovaxisinc.com/brand story and schedule a meeting with us. No charge. We're happy to advise you. And even if that's the only call we have, but we could also explore if a brand story workshop makes sense, which we can conduct individually on its own as a service, or we can explore what a custom marketing program could look like. And then also, if we could explore if the marketing audit and planning process might be needed ahead of the brand story process. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It often is if you feel that your brand storytelling could use some work, but also if you feel you're not sure why you're not generating the leads you want, you haven't really conducted comprehensive keyword research. You're seeing a lot of people are seeing declines in organic search traffic because Google AI results and other AI related searches are cannibalizing traffic that used to come there. A lot of people are spending a lot of money on Google Ads and wonder if it's working at all, or if it could work better and spend less money, which is often the case. So there are many reasons, in addition to some brand storytelling improvements, that might be important. And then all those can be prioritized in terms of, okay, we don't want to boil the ocean at once. So, and that's what the plan calls for, is often does start with brand storytelling because that's your foundational messaging. But then while that's being worked on, there could be parallel paths to improve your inbound and your outbound marketing. And then once the brand storytelling content is relaunched, then those efforts are well underway and starting to produce, and then it's all starting to work together.
That sounds like a good place to start and a good place for us to finish. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Pat.